Creepy last words before dying. There is a huge amount of curiosity surrounding people's last words before they pass. Some people have even gone on to share their stories about the last words spoken by people they knew, and many of the stories are pretty bizarre. The final words spoken by people are of interest mostly because of who the person was or what relationship they had with those they left behind. Interestingly, many people want to find out what famous people said as they were nearing their ends. They have no eyes. My grandfather on his deathbed said, "They have no eyes." It still gives me chills. Euclidean. Man. Fire. Fire. There's fire everywhere. I had an old lady flag me down in the hallway a few days before she died, and with her emaciated face and bulging eyes, she said, "You know where I'm going." I asked her what she meant, and she repeated herself. "You know where I'm going when I die. And it ain't up." I was taken aback and asked her if she wanted to talk with the priest we have on staff. She shook her head and said, "It's too late for that." A few days later, she was eating her supper and started screaming. She yelled, "Fire! Fire! There's fire everywhere." She died a few hours later, quite suddenly. I didn't sleep that night, and I really hope her soul found some rest. L_3. The body is in the woods next to the oak tree. Surgeon here. Not sure if this is creepy, but a man on his deathbed kept repeating the body is in the woods next to the oak tree over and over until he passed. The police were notified, and they did search some woods behind the man's house but never found anything. Really? Unbelievable. The next time you wash me, I will be dead. I once worked as a nurse, and I had a gentleman who didn't want to wash one morning and said to me, "The next time you wash me, I will be dead." I thought he was just being morbid like the old guys are, and then he asked his wife and got quite agitated. I went to continue with the other patients, and I got a call to help someone who died. Turns out he was right. Acid plumber. Am I dead? I'm in hell. I'm a lab person, and I had to go to the ER to draw blood from a code stroke patient that just came in. The EMTs couldn't get it. I got there, it was just me and him before he went to CT, and he looked at me and said, "Am I dead? I'm in hell." He died a couple of hours later. Poor old man. Bigger 23. I see a bright light. Horses. No eyes. No, no, no. The ER physician here had heard many last words from patients, but the creepiest one has to be of a man who was on his last breaths as he succumbed to renal failure. He said, "I see a bright light. Horses. No eyes. No, no, no." As he'd loudly yell. At this point, he was crashing when he suddenly woke up, looked up, and with his last breath he said, "I understand." And he died. We know in the medical field that these situations are provoked by a cascade of neurotransmitters and disarray due to tissue and organ failure, but I sometimes have my doubts, and perhaps we are seeing more than we are led to believe. Patlani. He's in all black, and he's got a top hat on. And his eyes are red. A nice old lady told my CNA she wanted to wear all white. When asked why, she said, "The man in black is here." She looked in the corner of the room. The CNA looked, but there was no one there. That's when I came into the room. We asked her to describe what she was seeing, and she said, "He's in all black, and he's got a top hat on." Then she whispered, "And his eyes are red," while her eyes moved across the room to directly behind the CNA like she was watching him move closer to us. She died later that night. But it was unexpected. That room creeped me out for a long time after that. Name withheld. The spiders are eating Papa. I was in the army in Pakistan to provide humanitarian support after an earthquake. There was a very serious school bus crash when a road gave way, and a dozen kids were killed. The first kid that we took off the ambulance and put on the stretcher to carry into our triage tent said, more like screamed, something in Urdu. When we got there, the doctor asked the translators what he said. "The spiders are eating Papa." We all just looked at each other for a second, then just proceeded with triage. Wander forever. Why is this happening to me? I work in a cardiac ICU. We had a patient who had a pulmonary artery rupture, a rare but known complication of a Swan-Ganz catheter. One minute he was joking around with us, and the next bright red blood was spewing out of his mouth. His last words before he died were, "Why is this happening to me?" It still haunts me years later. Awk_Ward 1. You look like an angel. I'm a nurse and was previously working at an assisted living community on the dementia/Alzheimer's unit. My very favorite patient had been declining pretty steadily, so I was checking on him very frequently. We would have long chats and joke around with each other, but in the last 2 weeks of his life, he stopped talking completely and didn't really acknowledge conversations directed at him at all. I finished my medication rounds for the evening and went to see him before I left. I told him I was leaving for the night and that I'd see him the following day, and he looked me in the eyes, smiled so genuinely, and said, "You look like an angel." I thought it was so sweet because he had not seemed lucid in weeks. He died the next morning. It really messed with me. Abstract. Get home safe, little one. Get home safe, little one. It wasn't what he said the same thing to me any time I had him as a patient for the evening. It was how he said it. He gave me this look and paused like he knew. The DNRs, in my experience, always know when it's time. It's creepy. Melissa Fern. Oh shit, oh no. Ugh. I was a hospice nurse for many years. It's a super gratifying job for a nurse, surprisingly. As a regular nurse, you are rarely offered thanks. Hospice nursing is an island unto itself. Mostly peaceful, lots of times sad, often a blessing. This is sad, but also creepy, and I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it. I had a 20-year-old kid, a gang member, who was dying of primary liver cancer. Super unusual, aggressive, and terminal. He was angry at the universe. His family was there to comfort him, but he literally spit in their faces. Every ounce of energy he had left was angry, mean, and ugly. His mom would beg him to lighten up and accept Jesus into his heart. He would swing at her and tell her to F herself. The family remained by his bedside in hopes he would chill out at the end. On his last day, hours, and moments, he was angry. The family called me into the room and told me they thought he was going. He wasn't responding, Cheyne-Stokes breaths, eyes glossy, and skin cold. The end was imminent. His lovely mother, in her dearest attempt, whispered to him to go towards the light, to her Jesus. With his dying breath, he opened his eyes, looked at her, and said, "F your Jesus." A second or two later, he slowly turned his head to the left and got the most horrific look on his face, as if he were looking at something we couldn't see, and horrified, like in a bad movie, his face contorted, and he screamed with his last breath, eyes wide, "Oh shit, oh no." Then made a guttural noise and promptly fell back into the bed and died. Every family member was shaking and too frightened to speak, and I left the room and took 2 days off. I don't care if I never find out what he saw. Lolixed.